The champagne cork launched into the morning sky, catching the sunlight like a flare before crashing down onto my property. A crowd of strangers in designer sunglasses erupted in cheers, glasses clinking beneath a massive, grand opening banner stretched across a building that was never supposed to exist. Right there, where my horses used to graze, stood a sprawling luxury resort. Pools, tennis courts, valet parking, and Karen, the HOA president, laughing like she'd just conquered a kingdom. You're probably wondering how the hell I let this happen. How a bunch of suburban tyrants turned my quiet land into a billionaire's playground. And why, instead of trying to stop them, I let them finish the job, and then sold the entire disaster out from under them for billions. If you'd asked me back then what I valued most, I wouldn't have hesitated. The land. Always the land. My family's stretch at the edge of Pine Hollow wasn't just dirt and trees. It was alive. It held stories in every rock, every bend in the creek. My grandfather bought it back when this town was just a dusty road and a bait shack. Over the decades, through storms and droughts, good years and bad, it stayed ours. Rolling pastures, a lazy silver creek, a stand of cottonwoods that marked the west fence line like silent sentinels. It was all I needed. All I wanted. Then the letters started arriving. The first violation notice came taped to my front door like a threat in broad daylight. Unauthorized structure, $500 fine. They were referring to the old tool shed that had stood behind the house since 1964, grandfathered into every zoning map and county record I could dig up. The next day brought another. Violation, non-compliant landscaping, $250 fine. Apparently the pasture grass, torn up by their construction crews, now counted as invasive overgrowth. Day 3. Unauthorized signage, $150 fine. Because I'd nailed a spray-painted plywood board to the fence that read, "Private property, and no trespassing," right where their trucks kept barreling through. It wasn't subtle. It was warfare in plain sight. Construction crews ramped up their noise campaign like clockwork, beginning their loudest work at 4 a.m., jackhammers echoing, floodlights blasting straight into my bedroom window. Cement trucks droned all day. Backup alarms beeped through the night. Dust from their site blanketed everything so thickly I had to change my HVAC filters twice a week just to breathe. Strangers in hard hats wandered across what little unpaved land I had left, clipboard in hand, pretending not to see me standing there, glaring at them from the porch. I started finding boot prints in my vegetable garden. Tire tracks in the flower beds my mother had planted before she passed. What had once been my sanctuary was now a war zone. At first I fought by the book. I documented every violation, photographed every trespass, filed formal complaints with the town clerk. But the clerk's office, once a bastion of common-sense country justice, had been infiltrated too. Every complaint was met with the same automated email. "Thank you for your concern. Your issue will be reviewed in accordance with community enhancement guidelines." Translation: no one was coming. If anything was going to change, I would have to change it myself. One night, walking along the remains of the creek, I noticed something strange. A slick, iridescent film floating on the surface. It caught the moonlight like an oil spill. I crouched down, scooped some water into a jar, and sealed it. A few days later, the lab results came back from the agricultural college 2 towns over. The news was ugly. Construction waste, chemical runoff, sealants, traces of lead and mercury. It wasn't just ugly, it was illegal. That's when it hit me. This was bigger than my land. Much bigger. The final piece fell into place when I found a folder, dropped behind the temporary fencing, probably by some careless contractor. Inside were blueprints and stamped approvals for the entire resort project. But something was off. The environmental impact report required for any major development like this was dated 6 months before the HOA had even held their so-called community feedback sessions. And that wasn't the worst of it. Sections of the report were copied and pasted from a shopping center proposal 3 counties away, geographic coordinates still intact. The engineer who supposedly signed off on it? Retired 5 years ago. The environmental consultant? No longer licensed. The supportive community survey? Full of names from people who'd moved away years ago, or in one case were dead. Was a fraud. Every inch of it. I had proof now. Real proof. Enough to bring the whole house of cards down. But not yet. Sitting at my kitchen table, surrounded by damning documents and printed emails, I had a realization. They wanted me to fight. They wanted me angry. Loud. Sloppy. They wanted me to charge into court with half-baked claims and get laughed out by some HOA-friendly judge. They were waiting for the crazy old landowner narrative to write itself. If I gave them that, they'd win. So I smiled. I paid the fake fines. I waved at the construction crews as they tore up more of my fields. I even showed up to their community meetings, sitting quietly in the back while Karen Mitchell, the queen bee of the Willow Bend HOA, talked about harmonious land use and revitalization. I nodded along. I even volunteered for their beautification committee. Let them think they'd broken me. Let them feel comfortable. That was always their mistake. Meanwhile, I built my arsenal. I installed hidden cameras on every inch of my remaining property, each one backed up remotely and encrypted. Every trespass. Every truck dumping debris into the creek. Every hard hat stepping foot past my fence without permission. Documented. Time-stamped. Stored. I wasn't just going to fight back. I was going to bury them. And I didn't just find the paper trail. I duplicated it, stored in 3 separate locations, each encrypted and offline. Then I went deeper. I combed through 5 years of public land records and HOA board transactions. What I found was a swamp of corruption. Kickbacks masked as landscaping contracts, sweetheart deals on maintenance bids, and donations to town council members who just happened to vote in favor of rezoning my land. Karen Mitchell, the clipboard tyrant in pearls, wasn't just a nosy HOA president. She was the silent partner in a shell company called Pine Horizon Development LLC. The very same company that had been contracted to manage resort construction. 2 other board members, Doug Fisher and Rachel Hensley, were listed as consultants. The truth was clear. This wasn't about community. The HOA was a front, a weapon, a corporate battering ram designed to shove old landowners out, steal their land by technicality, and flip it into gold. And every new discovery? It made me furious, but I didn't show it. I smiled wider. Nodded harder. Let them believe the fines and harassment had broken me. That I was just some stubborn old fool clinging to a past the world had already buried. Meanwhile, the trap was tightening. At night, I worked like a man possessed. I built timelines, mapped connections, traced the flow of dirty money. In the mornings, I was all smiles, picking up trash on the HOA's new walking trails, sitting quietly in their coffee meetings, letting Karen and her cronies gossip about hick holdouts and laugh over consulting fees. They never once suspected I was collecting ammunition. Then one day, Karen leaned across a community meeting table, smiled tight as a wire, and said maybe it was time I considered a more suitable living arrangement. I thanked her for her concern. They thought they'd won. Thought I'd been buried under their concrete and crushed by their fake rules. They had no idea. Because I wasn't digging down anymore, I was digging up. Towards something they'd never see coming. Then came the invitation. Thick gold-embossed cardstock, heavy as gilt. Willow Bend Resort and Spa grand opening celebration. Formal attire suggested. No children. Champagne on the terrace. The nerve of it made me laugh. They had desecrated my land, paved my creek, poisoned my soil, and now they wanted me to show up and applaud? I tossed the invitation onto the kitchen counter, right next to a worn leather folder. The real invitation. My ace. Inside, a brittle parchment from 1894, handwritten in old ink, still faintly smelling of damp earth. It was the original Holloway Covenant, older than any zoning law, HOA charter, or city council vote. A legal relic that had never been nullified, buried deep in county archives. It explicitly stated, land and water rights to remain in perpetuity, immune from subdivision, annexation, or condemnation, unless by direct heir or voluntary sale. No easements. No forced integration. No exceptions. And I had never given permission. The grand opening unfolded like a fever dream of suburban wealth. Valet attendants in matching blazers whisked away SUVs. Jazz music drifted over polished pavers. Women in sequin dresses clacked across what used to be my wheat field. Fairy lights sparkled where fireflies once danced. And towering above it all, the clubhouse, fake stone, fake beams, fake soul. The sign read, Willowbend Resort and Spa. A new standard in community excellence. I stood just outside, breathing in perfume and fresh asphalt. Then I straightened my jacket, nothing fancy, just dark denim over a black shirt, and walked through the archway, the covenant folder tucked under one arm. No one stopped me. Why would they? To them, I was just a local relic. I slipped through the crowd, past trays of bacon-wrapped scallops and laughter that echoed hollow under string lights, until I reached the stage. Karen stood at the podium, radiant in her designer gown, dripping with self-importance. Tonight, she cooed into the mic, we celebrate more than a development, we celebrate a dream. That's when I stepped onto the stage. A few heads turned. A murmur rippled. Karen faltered at the microphone as I tapped her politely on the shoulder. Excuse me, sir, this is a priva? Actually, I said, taking the mic with 2 fingers, this is public land. Or at least, it was supposed to be. A hush fell over the crowd. Karen stumbled back, her face flushing pink beneath foundation. I raised the old leather folder in the air. My name is Samuel Holloway, I said, voice calm, steady. And this land? Every square inch of it is still protected by the Holloway Covenant of 1894, a legal agreement recorded with the county and still in effect. It overrides zoning changes, prohibits annexation, invalidates any development done without direct heir consent. The silence was instant and total. I never sold this land. I never agreed to rezoning. I never signed a development contract. I turned slowly, letting my words settle. What you're standing on, your tennis courts, your overpriced condos, your boutique spa, it's all illegal. Gasps swept the courtyard. Karen lunged for the microphone. I stepped aside and opened the folder, tossing copies of the covenant into the air like confetti. They fluttered down like legal snow, into wine glasses, onto cocktail tables, caught in designer hairdos. If you need more proof, I said, smiling tightly, check the public records. The fake environmental reports. The forged signatures. The zoning vote that took place 6 months after the permits were dated. Cameras were rolling. Phones were up. Karen stood frozen, lips trembling. And I hadn't even started yet. And the conflict of interest filings? All conveniently omitted by your beloved HOA board. That's when the sirens hit. 2 police cruisers and a white van from the city inspector's office rolled up to the curb, lights flashing. Behind them came a convoy of county lawyers, some grim, some with the barely contained look of people who had been waiting for this moment. I had made sure of it. Karen staggered backward, her mouth working silently like a fish tossed on dry land. Doug Fisher tried to slip away toward the parking lot. An officer intercepted him before he made it 3 steps. Rachel Hensley collapsed into a folding chair, head buried in her hands. City inspectors fanned out across the resort like ants. Clipboards, soil kits, water sample jars. Cameras snapping away at every violation. A county official grabbed a megaphone and barked orders. All construction is suspended immediately, pending investigation for zoning fraud, environmental contamination, and illegal development. The crowd panicked. Guests scattered, their glittering cocktail dresses and tailored suits vanishing like roaches when the lights come on. Champagne glasses shattered against concrete. Waiters dropped trays. The jazz band trailed off mid-song, the final note hanging in the air like a last heartbeat. Karen clacked toward me, heels desperate against the cobblestone. "You can't do this," she hissed, face pale and makeup cracking. "This is our future. Our investment. You're ruining everything." "No, Karen," I said quietly, folding the covenant back under my arm. "You did that all by yourself." Behind me, the officials got to work, seizing records, photographing violations, handing out citations like Halloween candy. I turned and walked slowly back across the courtyard. The air smelled different now. Less like asphalt and perfume. More like rain and soil. Like home. I paused under the archway, glanced back one last time at the flashing lights and the crumbling monument to greed behind me. The war wasn't over. But the tide had finally turned, and it was beautiful. The fallout came fast. Brutal. Well-deserved. By sunrise, news trucks clogged the narrow county roads. Helicopters circled low overhead, filming the wreckage, muddy parking lots, unfinished tennis courts, a half-built spa already sinking into poorly compacted soil. Local headlines screamed. Zoning fraud scandal rocks Willowbend. Toxic runoff, fake reports, backroom deals. Suburban greed meets old-school reckoning. By lunchtime, national outlets picked up the story. The resort had become a symbol, not of luxury living but of arrogance and collapse. Karen Mitchell resigned as HOA president by sunset. She tried to spin it as a health decision, in a shaky Facebook post that got 12 pity likes before the comments were shut off. Doug lawyered up. Rachel was spotted shoving garbage bags full of shredded documents into the trunk of her Volvo, caught on camera by a local reporter grinning from across the street. The rest of the board vanished. Their website went dark. The HOA newsletters stopped. No farewell statement. No apology. Just silence. Meanwhile, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. Developers, attorneys, PR firms, even community liaisons looking to discuss a more productive path forward. Translation: they were desperate. Construction was frozen. Permits? Invalid. Environmental damage? The ticking time bomb. If the EPA came down hard, and I made sure they would, the resort was finished. Every day it sat idle cost millions. Every day I said nothing, the vultures circled higher over their balance sheets. They needed a miracle. And I had one. While they were throwing parties and digging my land into oblivion, I was busy collecting leverage. Thanks to the Holloway Covenant, I owned everything: water, land, access. I could have sued. Forced demolition. Let the site rot, a half-finished corpse dragging their investors down with it. But I had a better idea. I made them an offer. Not in some glass tower conference room either. I insisted every meeting take place on my land, under a faded canopy tent overlooking the ruined construction site. Their suits soaked with sweat. Their shoes sank into the soft earth their own runoff had ruined. Then I named my price. Calmly. Directly. Without blinking. $3 billion. Silence. You could hear the wind whistle through the broken scaffolding. They balked, of course. threatened lawsuits, bankruptcy, counteroffers. I let them. Then I began sliding photos across the table. Toxic runoff reports. Forged zoning approvals. Drone footage of contaminated soil dumped straight into my creek. Leaked emails coordinating permit fraud. Copies of falsified surveys. Utility hookups installed without authorization. I didn't yell. I didn't threaten. I just watched the color drain from their faces. By the end of the week, they folded. The wire transfer cleared Tuesday at 9:04 a.m. I stared at the numbers on my laptop screen, stunned. My lawyer, who'd spent decades fighting crooked developers, laughed out loud when he saw the final amount. "You didn't just win," he said. "You ended them." The resort sold a month later for pennies on the dollar to a foreign holding company. They bulldozed it and turned the land into a protected nature preserve. The bank foreclosed on the developer's other properties. Lawsuits bloomed like weeds after a rainstorm. Careers? Obliterated. Reputations? Ashes. Karen's McMansion got auctioned off in a foreclosure bundle 2 towns over. Doug Fisher fled to Florida, last seen selling timeshares. Rachel Hensley tried rebranding herself as a consultant, but one Google search tanked every client pitch before it began. And the Willow Bend HOA? Dissolved. 6 months later. No press release. No final letter. Just tall grass overtaking their precious stone sign. As for me, I stayed. I rebuilt my grandfather's house, not with prefab garbage or fake stone, but with honest wood and real nails. The creek runs its original path now, slow and silver again. I planted cottonwoods by the bank, deep-rooted, quiet giants that no HOA will ever touch. I added a porch on the east side. Perfect view of the sunrise. Every morning I make coffee, pull on my boots, and step outside into the world they tried to take from me. A world that is finally, irrevocably mine. And at the old road where their fake stone gate once stood, there's a new sign. Simple pine. Hand-painted in bold black letters. Sold, future site of karma. I take a sip of coffee. Let the steam rise into the cool morning air. And I smile. Some debts take time to collect. But when they come due, they're sweeter than anything money can buy.